Hey, welcome to SafeScape, your go-to haven for all things safety and resilience. I'm your host, Laika, and together with Kian, we are thrilled to have you join us today. Whether you're tuning in sa gitna ng commute mo ngayong umaga or just kicking back home, we've got a fantastic show lined up for you.
Tama ka dyan, Laika. We've got a riveting topic sa ating agenda ngayon that hits close to home para sa maraming mga kapwang Pilipino. Disaster risk reduction and preparedness. And trust me, isa itong conversation that you don't want to miss.
At para naman sa paksa natin ngayon, susuriin natin ang kasulukuyang kalagayan ng disaster risk reduction preparedness in the Philippines following the aftermath of Typhoon Yolanda. Pero wait, Kian, para naman sa listeners natin today, may you please do the honors of giving us a brief overview lang ng Typhoon Yolanda?
Sure, Laika. Kasi alam mo ba nung isang araw noong November 8, 2013, Typhoon Haiyan, also known as Super Typhoon Yolanda, ay naghasik ng galagim sa Pilipinas, coming in as a Category 5 storm. The typhoon's fury affected more than 14 million people across 44 provinces at kumuha ng 8,000 tao, displacing millions more. The typhoon's aftermath underscored the importance of disaster preparedness, response coordination, and ongoing support to foster resilience pag hinaharap ang isang disaster na tulad na ganito.
At hindi lang yun. At dahil kilala bilang as one of the fiercest storms ever recorded, ang Super Typhoon Yolanda ay nag-iwan ng napakalaking pagkawasak sa maraming communities sa Pilipinas, and one of them is Leyte, na kung saan maraming cities and towns that were largely destroyed. Kaya para maiwasan ang paulit-ulit na mga insidente at siguraduhing handa ang lahat sa anumang kalamidad, sobrang importante talaga na mag-stay tuned kayo ngayon mga listeners para magkaroon tayo ng sapat na kaalaman tungkol sa disaster risk reduction.
So, buckle up at samahan nyo kami ni Laika in embarking on this adventure and making SafeScape the highlight of your podcast playlist. Without further ado, let's dive into today's episode.
Sa episode nating ito, meron tayong special guest. She is a dedicated individual who has devoted an incredible 43 years of her life sa noble field of humanitarian and disaster risk reduction work. Nagsimula ang kanyang journey right out of college at the age of 20, and dito kaagad napapakita ang kanyang kahangahangang commitment on addressing the critical needs of communities facing adversity.
She is also the chair of Citizens Response Network at ang executive director of Leyte Center for Development. It is an honor to welcome ang kaisa-isang Miss Minette Jerusalem. Good day, ma'am, and thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
Kamusta naman po kayo, ma'am?
Yeah, we're getting ready for the conference in an hour. So,
Para po masimulan, sa palagay niyo, ma'am, ano yung mga steps o kailangan gawin ng isang gobyerno para enhance ang pag-handle ng natural risks, specifically sa pagsuporta ng livelihoods, residences, at ang overall na kapakanan ng isang apektadong Pilipino?
so I will repeat what I said 2 weeks ago when the UN Special Rapporteur on Climate and Human Rights came to us in Tacloban, Leyte. So we had a dialogue, and he asked me exactly the same questions, like what we would recommend to the government. Number one, we strongly recommend for the government to invest on DRR capacity building for poor and vulnerable communities and for the whole country. So the people would better know how to mitigate the impact of disasters, whatever kind of disaster. It can be human-induced or natural. And then one has to organize the community so that the communities would know how to better prepare for the impacts. And a very important component of community resilience is livelihood and food security, because a community that is food secure is more resilient and we proved this during Typhoon Yolanda, the food security aspect, because our cooperative stores which we help organize in the villages, in the barangays, were the first responders during Typhoon Yolanda. In the event of a disaster, it's not going to be the government who will be the first responder. It's not even going to be us in the NGO. So who will it be? It's going to be your neighbor, your kapitbahay, who will be the first responder. So we've got to capacitate the communities.
So, it's clear nga talaga na it's important for the government to invest in like capacity building, ayun, para magkaroon ng sapat na awareness yung mga tao on how to better prepare. And you also mentioned that the importance of livelihood programs and ganyan. So, para sa inyo po, do you believe that the existing government measures are sufficiently effective in strengthening the country's disaster risk reduction efforts?
Insufficient.
Mm.
Very insufficient, I would say. Kasi one acquaintance, OCD regional director in the past years, I won't mention his name, even told me, sabi niya, Minette, the future of DRR and community resilience is in the community itself and you in the private sector, in the CSOs. Why? Because the government, they will change officials every 3 years. And it's not sure that the next mayor or governor will still be supportive of DRR programs. And even he said, he's a director of OCD, but there's no guarantee that he will be transferred to another region or to another agency. So there's no sustainability if it's the government. So it's really the NGOs, the CSOs, and the community that will really sustain. Now, the government has the most resources, but their duty as duty bearers to really implement the DRR programs in the community level. But if you ask me, it's not really felt like we have in the communities, the Barangay Disaster Risk Reduction Council. It's more often than not on paper. They really don't know the real function, and although there are trainings, it doesn't seep down to the community level, to the grassroots. And then what makes matters worse is that the officials change during election, and even the national government agencies change directors from time to time. So it's the sustainability aspect. So that has to be responded to by the state.
Ngayon, ma'am, kaya nyo ba ma-share yung insights ng latest Center for Development in the current situation, yung kanilang initiatives, yung programs na in-undertake dahil sa aftermath ng Super Typhoon Yolanda, yung nangyari nga doon, para ma-enhance yung disaster risk reduction at yung preparedness ng region na naapektuhan?
I would like to say, even before Typhoon Yolanda hit us on last November 2013, we were already doing DRR in the community, especially those that are poor and vulnerable. Now, when Typhoon Yolanda hit us hard last November 2013, the communities where we did DRR were better prepared. And we were able to document this with the help of an Austrian TV crew from Vienna, compared to the areas where there were no DRR programs at all. So first, as I said earlier, the communities through the People's Organization, were the first responders. They gave out food and other basics to their members in the community. So that's one gauge of community resilience. Second, there was zero casualty in the areas where we did DRR. Why? Because in our trainings, we simulated evacuation drills. We taught them how to plan. And because they knew how to do preemptive evacuation, they were able to go to their designated places where they would be safe, even before Typhoon Yolanda and the other typhoons that came hit them. So that's one proof. So we've been doing that even before Yolanda, and that's proof that when Typhoon Yolanda hit us hard, there was zero casualty, and the communities with organizations which we help organize were able to respond first. Like less than 24 hours after Yolanda, we were giving out, the cooperatives were giving out food.
You said that you were already doing DRR long before Typhoon Yolanda, and you mentioned that you had zero casualties. So, can you highlight any notable success stories or mga positive outcomes ganun, resulting from LCDE's efforts in advancing disaster risk reduction preparedness in the region?
Yung number one, our mangrove saved more than 2,000 lives during Typhoon Odette. We planted them 8 years ago. And like now, it was proof, it's a success, that natural resilience is better. It can save lives on the ground in the communities. It's easily accessible, it's cheaper compared to cement. So that's number one. And second, organizing communities as being the first responders because of our DRR capacity building, knowledge transfer. They're able to prepare to mitigate the impact of disasters. We've got zero casualties in communities where we did DRR. So that's another success that we contributed. Yeah, so so the natural resilience, mangroves, upland trees. Second, community organizations mitigating the impact of the disasters. And third, our livelihood and food security programs, uh, benefiting the poor and vulnerable and making them have extra income, at least contributing to resolve poverty, towards resolving poverty. An example is in 2021, we gave 20,000 pesos each to poor women-headed households to be able to start up a small business in the barangay because it was so difficult in 2021. People had very low incomes because of the lockdown. They couldn't go to other places to seek jobs. No, when it was typhoon, kasi during typhoon season, they tried to go to Manila or other city centers to work as vendors, construction workers. But during the lockdown in 2021, they were not able to go out of their municipalities, the municipio. So we gave them livelihood, 20,000 each. So I think we reached out to some 180 women. So that was more than 7 million pesos. And they start up, like some had a vegetable garden, others had mga kakanin, no? They started up kakanin business. Yeah, so ganon. That's our, so of course there are many challenges, but these are some of our quantitative and qualitative success stories for DRR in poor communities.
Ano naman yung mga current early warning systems at yung mga communication protocols dito, ma'am, na itayo para ma-ensure yung timely at maging mas epektibo yung response ng Leyte pag magkakaroon ng potential disasters, considering the lessons at kung may apply dahil doon galing sa Typhoon Yolanda.
During our DRR programs, we give out rain gauge, a floodwater gauge. We give out megaphones so that they can announce, no, when a typhoon is coming. We give them radio sets, solar lamps to be better prepared. We give them equipment to help save, like ropes, flashlights, solar flashlights. Yeah, so even before the typhoon strikes, especially in communities where there's high vulnerability. For our mangroves, we even gave out motorboats so that they can monitor the mangrove protected areas. We encourage LGUs to make ordinances to protect the mangrove protected areas. So yun. And the community has their own usual protocols for using this early warning equipment. We also gave out laptops in one project, yung nahit ng Typhoon Odette. And yung sound system so that they will be able to announce to the communities kung may coming typhoon, ma- ma-warn, ma-warn ang mga villagers.
So, looking forward naman, ano kaya yung mga future plans or strategies ng LCDE para ma-sustain and ma-expand yung efforts nila in disaster risk reduction and preparedness?
We plan kasi NGO kami, we don't have regular funding.
Opo.
So we continue, it's a continuing challenge to fundraise in the context of worldwide inflation. Everyone is affected, our donors are also affected. So we have a continuing effort to fundraise so that we can implement more programs on DRR. And of course, one of our programs is also emergency response. So
Hmm.
like now, binabaha kami sa Samar. There's a lot of flooding. So it's a continuing challenge to raise resources. So with your question, what we plan to do, we plan to continue. And second, we to continue our DRR programs and advocate with the Philippine government what they should be doing, no, based on our what we see on the ground, we who are really on the ground. So to continue lang our current, and even right now, we are in a conference to review our EPRP, our Emergency Preparedness and Response Plan, to be better able to serve a larger number of the affected communities in a shorter time. How do we do this? Fundraising. We have got to have the capacity to scale up our our personnel during crisis situation, manage the organization. So that's also organizational management capacity for our organization.
You mentioned kanina that there are challenges. So, can you specify naman any challenges LCDE encountered in its post-Yolanda DRR initiatives? And paano kaya na-overcome or na-address ng organization yung mga challenges na ito?
The continuing challenges is resource generation. Kasi unlike the Philippine government na they have regular funding, kami sa NGOs, we have to fundraise to be able to sustain our programs, our organization. So we have to write proposals, no? Project locally and
Mm.
internationally. Yeah, so ganon. That's one major challenge kasi it's difficult. Sometimes we have fun, sometimes we don't. And we all go on volunteer basis. We have to cut down on staff. No, staff
Mm.
that we really need because uh, we don't have enough sufficient resources. So that's number one challenge. The we have the capacity but not the financial side. No? Second challenge is trying to reach out to the international community. No, going there, speaking to them, projecting CDRN, the Citizens Disaster Response Network, as a national network, trying to serve the poorest and most vulnerable. Third challenge is, as I said earlier, the threats from the LCAC, uh, vilifying us in the humanitarian work, um, to linking us to terrorist financing, terrorist organization when we are just simply doing our job, helping the poor and vulnerable. Yes. So those are the challenges. It's really threatening at times, but we try to go on with our work because our real mission is to be of service, servant leaders, to be servant leaders, meaning serving the poor amongst our people and being leaders at the same time, meaning trying to lead our people, of which we are part of, to be able to liberate themselves from poverty and become more resilient to disasters. And we also encourage the youth like you to be socially involved kayo mga kabataan because you're the future of our country. Sana we can expose you to our community so that you will see the strong need for young professionals to help in community work. Kasi what we were taught in schools, even me in school, is very individualist. That's our educational system eh. So individualist. You study, you graduate from college, you work abroad para more income for the Philippine government. You work abroad and that's it. There's nothing that teaches us to be concerned with our community, with our people, no, in our country, to have that fire of passion to serve our people and to liberate our people from poverty, and in a way also syempre solving corruption by being part of a strong people's organization kasi like I'm addressing this to the youth and like you na sana you would be open to get to know better organizations that really want to our communities to be disaster resilient and solve the root causes of our vulnerability. Yun ang panawagan ko because as the UN said, we only got 9 years to save our planet. After 9 years, the climate crisis will be irreversible. And kawawa naman ang future generation. So it really must be for the youth.
Since yun din naman yung pakay po namin in doing this is to serve the public and yun nga po, and speaking of serving the public, as a server and a leader po, may mga notable changes sa komunidad and yung kanilang perception sa disaster preparedness and response since LCDC began its post-Yolanda efforts. And if so, ano naman sa tingin nyo yung naging contribution to these positive shifts?
Yes, after Typhoon Yolanda, we noticed that the community people are more cooperative after the experience of many dead and missing. No, mas cooperative sila when may panawagan na preemptive evacuation. They readily cooperate to evacuate because they know from experience, especially sa mapait na experience ng Yolanda, how many died and went missing. So yun, number one, mas cooperative sila and mas eager sila to know more about the climate crisis and the root causes of why we experience stronger storms with storm surges. What's the connection to the big logging companies or the mining companies? So we always try to delve deeper into issues, not just the effect, which is the typhoon, the storm surge, but to delve deeper. And when you delve deeper, you really analyze the root causes, which is really human induced, no, yung root cause ng vulnerability.
So, you said earlier that LCDE has partnerships on other programs and or organizations like yung DSWD. So, can you discuss any partnerships or collaborations with other non-governmental organizations or government agencies or kahit mga international, baka may mga international entities na nag-engage sa organization ninyo to further its disaster risk reduction and preparedness goals?
Mainly with government agencies like local government agencies, LGU, mayors, governor. It's more on coordination, not resources. In fact, we're the ones giving resources. More on coordination and cooperation with the local government unit. And same way with the national agencies like the SWD, more on like following the law to register. It's a law kasi eh. You have to be registered legally with the SWD. No, so ganon. With international partners na NGO din, we have many international partners. NGOs din sila in many countries in Germany, all over not naman all over, siguro mga 4 countries in Europe, tapos in US, in Australia, in New Zealand. Yeah, so an example of our partners since the 80s is Diaconie Katastrophenhilfe in Berlin, Germany. And then we have the Swiss Catholic Lenten Fund in Switzerland. And now recently, we are partnering with the Swedish government, MSB. They're like our Office of Civil Defense government in Sweden. And in the US, so the Foundation for Philippine Progress, an organization of migrant Filipinos, and many others. In Japan, we have Peace Winds Japan. In Singapore, we have Mercy Relief Singapore, Hope Bridge South Korea.
Ayun nga po ma'am, marami na nga po ngayon ang sabi. Yung final thoughts naman gusto ko marinig. Ano yung gusto mong sabihin sa buong sistema ng Pilipinas at ng gobyerno para bigyan sila ng aksyon at ng accountability para mag-initiate talaga? At hindi lang yung mga NGOs, yung komunidad, ano yung gusto mong masabi sa kanila para mag-insight talaga na something na maiintindihan nila?
Sad to say, not only sa Philippines, but all over the world, it's the poor and vulnerable communities who suffer the most from the disasters. Why? Because of their being vulnerable, they have lesser capacity to mitigate the impact of the disasters. No, because they're poor na nga eh. So they have less options, no options nga at all. So disasters from caused naturally or due to war or development aggression. And it's because of exploitation from their companies, the rich companies, especially in capitalist countries, who exploit our natural resources and who have their local supporters in governments all over the world. Of course, it's all I can say. It's really all about money, and it's really all about profit, and not about the well-being of majority of the people of the world. So, yung laban natin, I think, should also be global. That's exactly what we're doing now. We're trying to establish linkages with other NGOs and people's organizations all over the world because we face a common issue, and our common issue is the climate crisis, and we face a common enemy because it's the big capitalist companies and countries that exploit the resources of the world, and why so many people are hungry all over the world, in the Philippines, in Asia, in Africa, and it's us, no, in the poor countries that suffer the most. Yeah, so yun yung panawagan, and I don't think it can be solved overnight because the like people in government have their own self-interest. Like, look, who's in Congress? The congressmen are also stockholders of mining companies. They own huge estates. So you think they will give way to land reform, genuine land reform for our peasants? So it should really be a strong people's movement composed of all sectors, no, youth, academe, workers, farmers, women, fisher folk, who should really move for that change, change which will really develop our country and even the whole world. Kaya it should be a link up also with POs from other countries. And that's what we're doing now, linking up in Asia Pacific, in Europe, because we face common issues.
It has been an enlightening meeting and I hope yung mga nakikinig ngayon were able to learn a lot from this dahil napaka-importante nga talaga ng mga iyong sinabi and based on what you said, ma'am, about how yung mga poor and vulnerable communities, yung mga naapektuhan, kailangan nga talaga natin magkaroon ng sapat na awareness when it comes to this, especially na prone nga talaga ang bansa natin na maka-encounter ng mga kalamidad. Kaya importante nga talaga na magkaroon tayo ng sapat na kaalaman sa disaster risk reduction and preparedness at malaman din kung alin-alin yung mga organizations, yung mga NGOs, pati rin yung mga government initiatives na possible na tumutulong sa atin, pati rin yung mga progress nila. So that basically wraps our talk with Miss Minay Jerusalem. Thank you, ma'am, and we hope na kayong mga listeners today ay maraming napulot sa episode na ito.
Yes,
Good luck
thank you,
po. Thank you po very
Christian
much,
and
Atay.
Laika, no? Thank you,
Opo.
Christian
Thank
and
you
Laika.
po.
Thank you po.
Bye.
Ngayong episode talaga, Laika, has been nothing short of enlightening, no? Ang dami nating nalaman kay Miss Minette.
Tama ka dyan, Kian. Nagkaroon tayo ng malaking pribilehyo talaga na tuklasin ng mga mahalagang detalye sa disaster risk reduction and preparedness sa Philippines.
Ayun nga, Laika, as we wrap up this episode, we would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude para sa ating guest ngayon from the latest Center for Development. Palakpakan natin si Miss Minette Jerusalem for sharing their expertise at pagbibigay-pugay sa intricacies of disaster management.
And of course, syempre hindi naman natin makakalimutan ang ating listeners. Kaya malaking pasasalamat talaga sa ating listeners ngayong araw for joining us on this journey.
That's right. Thank you so much for the listeners who tuned with us today. This has been Kian.
And this has been Laika, and you're listening to SafeScape, your go-to haven for all things safety and resilience. Remember, knowledge is power. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay safe.